If you're curious to know how much freelance writers are really making, well, I'm about to break it down for you. I'm a full-time freelance writer, contributing to places like Forbes, Condé Nast Traveler, and Business Insider. And in this video, I'm breaking down what I got paid month over month and then sharing my entire salary at the end of the video. And if you want to skip to that part, I won't be offended. So if you're nosy, which same, or maybe you're a beginner freelancer wondering how much income potential there actually is, let's jump right into it. I'm going to be breaking down exactly what I made month over month, including my highest paying clients, my lowest paying clients, and the average per article. Then we're going to go over the peaks and valleys and general difficulties of freelance writing in this economy. So let's get into it. So in the month of January, I made $8,143.73. Keep in mind, this is in Canadian dollars, so even though I write mostly for American publications, I do have it come into my American bank account, and then I pull all of that money into my everyday Canadian bank accounts. So this is the conversion at that time, and I will put the American conversion somewhere up here so that you can follow along if you're in the US as well. So in the month of January, this is everything that hit my bank account. It's important to note that this is what hit my bank account in January. So this was not all of the writing work that I did for the month of January. When you invoice as a freelance writer, there's net terms. So a lot of places you'll send your invoice and then it's like either net 30 to net 90 days. And that means that anytime within those say 90 days, you'll get paid. All of this work was technically completed the year prior, but then I got paid for it in January. So my highest paying client for this month was a copywriting gig in the travel space. It was one of the major travel booking websites. I was doing blog content for them, and I got paid $2,164.73, and that would be for about 10 different articles. So I get paid about $200 an article from them. So my lowest paying client for this month was a men's lifestyle publication that I've been writing for since I was in university. They were actually my first job out of university. I was a full-time editor for them. It was true blessing at the time and still is. They recently folded, sadly. But anyways, I got paid $348.75 from Askmen, and that was for one single article. So in February, I made $5,103.22. This was probably some leftover from the year prior hitting my bank account, and then some of the net 30 terms that I have from my work in January would start hitting now. The highest paying client was a home and garden website that I do a lot of kind of fun lifestyle content for. I got paid $1,423.33 from them, and that was for 4 articles. So I did 4 articles, 1 article per week with them. And then my lowest paying client this month, health blog. So I got paid $277.32 from them, and that was for 1 article. So one about 800-word article outlining something to do with living with psoriatic arthritis. Moving on. So March was a pretty good month. I got paid $10,586.41. I wrote for 8 different places this month, or I should say I got paid from 8 different places this month, the highest being $5,315.06. So this was actually a really fun assignment that I did in January. It was in collaboration with a legacy travel publication and a cruise line, and it was travel copywriting that would live in cruise staterooms. So it was kind of like a guide to different destinations in Canada, and any travelers on that cruise line would have it waiting for them in their stateroom. So that was really fun to work on. I love doing content like that. And then the lowest was $250 flat, which actually was some outsourced copywriting work I picked up from my fellow freelance friend who had recently had a baby and she just needed someone to help her with outlines. So I took that on and it was $250. The thing about freelance writing is that things like having a baby or going on vacation or even getting sick and having to take time off, it's really hard because you are self-employed and there's no one to replace you. My friend, for example, like we live in Canada, if she was working full-time, she would have had mat leave for I think it's a year. But because she's a freelance writer, she would lose her entire income if she stopped writing. So she had to just take on as many clients as she could handle while her baby was sleeping and then kind of outsource them when she needed the extra help. I love freelancing. It's changed my life in so many ways, but that is definitely something to consider. I can't remember the last time I actually took a holiday, but then at the same time, I work on my own schedule. I can work wherever. There's a lot of freedom, but there are also different things to consider. So moving on to April, I made $7,569.66. I got paid from 8 different clients, the highest being $2,455.07, and that was from the same Home and Garden publication that I had mentioned previously. This would have been about 8 articles, I want to say. So I was bumped up to 2 articles per week. The lowest being $350. This was from a Canadian hostel brand that has a blog. I will say I prefer working with American clients because the pay is better and it's usually more consistent. But this Canadian hostel company, their blog, it might not pay as well, but I have a bit more freedom for personal essays, and the editor is really lovely to work with as well. So I think that's something to keep in mind when you freelance. It's like if you're doing it because you love your craft, sometimes I feel like it's okay to take lower paying jobs if you enjoy it. But maybe that's just me. I don't know. Let me know in the comments what you think about that. But yeah, so from them, I got paid $350, and that would be for 2 articles. So I think one was $150 and the other one was about $200. One of the articles that I wrote in this time frame was about going to a Turkish hammam for the first time. I'll put it here. And it was really cool to write about that. And yeah, so I should add that in the month of April, I had just gone through a breakup. I was living in Istanbul. It was my first time living abroad. And in April, I decided to take basically a month off to write a personal memoir that I was working on. So keep that in mind. So I took very minimal assignments in April. So moving forward into May, you might notice a little bit of a dip in my income, and that is because I took 4 weeks to just focus basically on personal writing. So moving into May, you'll see that there was a dip in my income. I made $2,559.84. And like I said, that's because I took a month off to focus on my own personal writing, which in hindsight, now that I'm in debt again, I probably should not have done that. But it also has to do with changes in the Google algorithm, and that in turn affects publications and then in turn affects how they work with freelancers and their freelance budget. So this was kind of the turning point where a lot of the clients I worked with, their budgets were lower and they started working with in-house writers instead of freelancers. So that is reflected here as well. In May, I was paid from 4 different clients, the highest being $1,069.44. That was from a travel brand that I was doing shopping content for. And the lowest was $320.96. That was from a frugal living blog that I loved writing for. Unfortunately, they've stopped publishing new content, but $320.96 was from one article that I wrote, probably something to do with saving money, and that's my beat, so it was fun. Moving on to June, I got paid from 5 different clients. I made $3,654.73. The highest paying client was the Home and Garden publication that I've talked about in the past. From them, I made $1,370.24. So I think it was around 4 to 5 articles that I did with them that month. The lowest was the Frugal Living blog that I mentioned from the month previous. So with them, I made $313.20. Something that I want to briefly point out, just because I'm noticing it now, and it's never the highest or the lowest, but I have one single anchor client, which it didn't used to be that way. So just a brief tangent. When I started freelancing full time almost a decade ago now, I had many anchor clients. Some of them so an anchor client is repeat business that you either have a contract with, or it's like a handshake deal where you know that they're going to give you a certain amount of work every month. And for me, that has decreased a lot over the years, which makes it a little bit more stressful because every month I have to pitch and go out and find new places to write for or get my editors to assign stories to me or what have you. And my only anchor client for the year of 2025 was really this middle one from, you can see I got paid June 20th from them. So that's a really big business publication. And they pay me around 500 US dollars a month. That's for 10 articles. So it's only $50 an article US. It comes out to around 600 Canadian per month, depending. But yeah, I just want to note that like freelance writing, the peaks and valleys are really hard, and the industry has changed a lot since I got into it. So moving on to July. In July, I made $6,157.64. I got paid from 7 different clients this month, the highest being the same home and garden publication I was talking about. I made $3,066.64 with them. That would be for around 10 articles. The articles, it depends on the scope, whether I'm building them in the CMS, if it requires interviews and stuff like that. Usually they pay me around $200 US per article. The lowest paying was $200.24. That is from the health blog that I write psoriatic arthritis personal essays for. And then I want to point out, just for example, like the $507.12, that was from a decently well-known travel publication, and that's just one story. So for one story written for them, I made $500 Canadian. And I wrote that about a trip to Northern Cyprus that I took like 2 years before. Freelance writing is just kind of interesting because for some places I'll get paid $50 for a story, and for some places I'll get paid $500 for a story. So it's really like you really have to decide what your values are and if you're willing to work for a lower amount. For me, when it's articles that I'm passionate about and enjoy writing, so especially in the travel space, if I can have consistent assignments, but they're fewer dollars than the one-off $500 assignments, I'll still take them. But I know other writers, they won't work for less than $1 a word. And their income, I don't know if their income is similar to mine or not, because I haven't seen anyone making videos that are this transparent about freelance writing. But I do know people that won't work for less than $1 a word. And then there's August. Dun 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 dun. So throughout the summer last year, this is what they mean when they talk about the peaks and valleys of being a freelance writer. This is a combination of the changes in the algorithm, the economy, summer being slower in general, and then also, if I'm being honest, it's because it was my first full summer in Istanbul, and I spent a lot of the summer just going to the beach, hanging out with my boyfriend, going to workout classes, and taking full-time Turkish lessons. So I didn't focus on my business as much as I could have. But thankfully, I don't really know what to say about this. I feel like I'm laughing about it now, but I just remember in the month of August, my poor boyfriend just listening to me nonstop saying like, "Oh crap, I gotta lock in. Like, what do you mean I made $600 this month? Like, do I have to get a full-time job? Do I need to leave Istanbul? Like, what's happening?" So yeah, my highest paying client and my lowest paying client. And my entire income for the month of August was a grand total of $635.61. That was from the money saving blog that I told you about, which is kind of funny. My only payment was from a frugal living blog, and that was for 2 articles. So each article was about $300-ish. Yikes. It was a fun summer though, I'm not gonna lie. Okay, so things really picked back up in September, thankfully. I was starting to get paid from the articles that I had written right before the summer started. So my net 90 payments started coming in. I made a total of $9,023.61 in the month of September. My highest paying, the way that I had it kind of like classified in my budgeting app, was a mass payment that I got from a variety of different clients. So that's why there's one that says $3,244.74. That was 4 clients that had owed me money from a while ago that all paid me on the same day. So I ended up just grouping that together. So realistically, my highest paying client was actually the Home and Garden publication that I had mentioned. I got paid $2,271.54 from them. And my lowest paying client was, once again, the Frugal Living blog. I got paid $318.33, and that was for one article, probably a tip story about how to make grocery shopping cheaper or something like that. And then we're into October. So in October, I decided to start my great lock-in process of trying to get more clients. You can see some of them here. A lot of them did not turn out very well. I feel like I, for some reason, just wasn't trusting myself to go out and get high paying, more legacy clients that I've worked with in the past. And instead, I was trolling like job boards trying to find things. So in October, I made $4,640.14. The highest paying client was the Home and Garden publication I mentioned. So I got $1,744 from them. And the lowest paying client was a new entertainment blog that I applied for, went through multiple rounds of interviews, and started writing for them, only to find out that they paid something like a penny a word or some. No, what was it? It was like, I think it was $10 per 1,000 views. And keep in mind, it was a brand new website, so they weren't like pulling in views. But I didn't know that until I started writing for them. So that was like such a rookie mistake. But yeah, so I started writing for them in September. I think I did 3 or 4 articles and I made $44.14. So around $10 an article. I also want to mention another one-off article. On October 17th, I got paid $474.78. That was for a single travel article. A well-known publication reached out to me asking if I wanted to write something for them about, what was it about? I think it was airline amenities or something like that. So I said yes, obviously, and that was a great, fun article to write. And for almost $500 for a single story, it's not bad. And another one, October 15th, another travel story from somebody that I've written for quite a lot in the past. This was a pitch that I sent them in the summer. I actually went to Macedonia with my boyfriend, and it was a holiday, but I intended on pitching it. So I got that pitch picked up. I did a travel guide to Macedonia and I was paid $523.72 for that. But the great thing is, because I wrote an article about it, the flight that I bought and my Airbnb were both tax write-offs. So, and Macedonia is a really budget-friendly destination if you're already in Europe. So this article, the $500 actually paid for my entire trip, which is really great when that happens. It doesn't happen often. I feel like nobody talks about how travel writing is a rich man's game, but it does happen if you fly from Istanbul to Skopje, stay in a cheap Airbnb, and then get a well-paying story out of it. All right, so in November, I made $4,386.13. I got paid from 8 different clients. The highest paying client was the Home and Garden publication that I write for. I made $1,653.78 from them. And the lowest paying were, unfortunately, a lot of the places that I tried to pick up in the Great Lock-In. So you can see on November 16th, I was paid $29.24. That was from the entertainment blog, which I parted ways with after this month. I think this was 2 articles that I wrote for them, and I made less than $30. And keep in mind, this is before taxes, so it was really like less than $10 an article. And if you're a freelance writer or you know anything about the industry, I also had to build the articles in WordPress, add images, and get it publication ready. So it's not just writing it, it's the complete production of the article for $10. Like, No. I just want to talk about the second lowest. That was the Canadian hostel blog that I write for. It was $150 for one article, but like I said, I love the editor there. I love writing the stories. They're all personal essays, which is like my favorite thing to write about, personal travel stories. It's like one of my favorites. So $150 for I think around 700 words. It's not great, but I really enjoy that. So, and then the $387 on November 16th was another new client that I picked up. It was another Canadian publication, and like I said, I don't love writing for them because I just feel like you don't get paid as well as you do from US clients. And for some reason, I've always had like more difficult experiences writing for Canadian publications. They're not as streamlined. Like, it's just, I don't know, they expect you to do more work for like significantly less money. And it's just like sometimes really disjointed. So this was a finance blog that I found looking for writers on LinkedIn. I had to have an interview on Skype with them, which I kind of feel like when you have to interview for a writing position that's freelance, it's a red flag. I can't really recall a time where I've had an interview for a freelance writing role that has been long term or worked out well if there is an interview involved, and I don't know why, but that's just like how it's gone for me. So there was that. But I started writing for them. I was doing updates for their travel credit cards and lounges and basically the travel side of finance and like credit card perks and what have you. $387 I think was for, they were paying me by the hour, and I think it was $25 an hour for updates. But the hours were predetermined for how long you were supposed to spend on each project. And it was rewriting content, double checking the quality of the content if things were still relevant, and then making it publication ready, but not in WordPress. It was actually like coding the story out, which I really hope that my boyfriend doesn't watch this far into this video because he's a software engineer and would just shame me for saying this, but just having to like do the little bit of coding was just like too much for my brain and not worth the $20 an hour. Like, it just was not for me. I'm sure a software engineer could do it in like 20 seconds flat, but for me, it was like many hours of work. Anyway, moving on. So then in December, which was not the best month, $3,566.54. So I had a lot going on in my life at this point. I was being deported from Turkey all through October and November. I was trying to find workarounds. I was working with a lawyer. I was running back and forth to the immigration office. I was not in the best headspace. And so the great lock-in kind of fizzled out. And yeah, so we ended up here, which I'm not gonna lie, like $3,566.54 is still enough for my basic cost of living now. But it was not then because I was spending so much on lawyer fees. I had, anyway, tangent for another video. My highest paying client this month was the Home and Garden publication, which has kind of, I guess, become an anchor client now. I worked with this editor at a different Home and Garden publication during the pandemic, and then I worked with her again when she started her own blog, and now again at this national Home and Garden publication. So I do really enjoy writing this. But yeah, so in December from her, or from this company, I got paid $914.54. And my lowest paying client this month was again the Canadian hostel blog. I got paid $150 from them for a single article. But like I said, I don't mind because I love that editor. And then the second lowest, which I just want to point out, is the Canadian money blog that I mentioned. So I got paid $180. And so at $20 an hour, this should have been about 9 hours of work total, but it was probably taking me about double the time. So I actually parted ways with them at the end of the year. So my total income for last year was $66,027.37, or on average, $5,502.28 a month. And keep in mind, this is before taxes. My best month was the month of March when I made $10,586, and my lowest month was the month of August when I made $635. I just finished doing my taxes for last year, and I just find it really eye-opening. The peaks and valleys of freelance writing, I've learned, aren't just month over month or quarter over quarter, but also year over year. So when I quit my full-time job, actually, so I was freelancing and working full-time for a couple of years. And then when I quit my full-time job, I was immediately making six figures just from freelancing. Like, I had so much work falling in my lap that I hate to say this, but I ghosted some editors who were emailing me wanting to work with me. I just like didn't have the bandwidth, and I would like go back and find these emails and feel really awful. Obviously I don't do that anymore, and I've learned. And to be fair, I was quite young when I started freelancing, so yeah, business has never been my strong suit, but I regret doing that. But anyway, yeah, like at that time, like right before the pandemic, I was easily making like between $100,000 to $150,000. I think my best year was around $170,000 before taxes. And if you've watched any of my other videos, you know that at that time I was not paying my taxes. So now when I'm making $66,000 a year, that's $100,000 less than previous years. And trying to get out of that tax debt now, when the freelance writing industry is not as strong as it used to be, it's been a real struggle. Yeah. That being said, I think that freelance writing is still a really great industry. I feel like I've met so many people. I've done so many cool things like in life just from being a freelancer and having the freedom to go travel if I want to, go on press trips, work when I want to, take language lessons in the morning because I can create my own schedule, etc. But I do think these days, with the economy being the way it is, AI on the rise, the algorithm dictating everything, I just think it's really important that if you're relying 100% on freelance writing income, you have to be frugal, you have to be saving money, you have to be planning for those $635 income months because they happen, but so do the five-figure months. I think it's just about being responsible with your finances, tracking it, and treating freelance writing like a business, because it is, and not just a creative pursuit, which is, I think, what I fell into for a long time. But anyway, there you have it. That's what I made last year as a full-time freelance writer with 10 years of experience. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions about freelance writing, because I'd be happy to do more videos like this. I feel like freelance writing is really gatekept, and it shouldn't be. So I'm happy to share anything to do with freelance writing. I'm an open book, obviously. So yeah, let me know in the comments and see you in the next one.